Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thanks so much for being with us. This is Conversations About Caregiving. It's our newest talk show, and we pick topics and then discuss them with family caregivers and or certified caregiving consultants. And tonight, the certified caregiving consultants are joining me, and we're going to talk about a topic that is of current interest. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're talking about, and then I'll introduce you to our consultants. In Indiana, there is a funding shortage for its Medicaid program that pays parents and spouses to provide care for a family member. So what that means is when the next budget year starts, the next fiscal year, they actually will disenroll, take those individuals off the program, and those individuals would have to find other types of care, like they'd have to hire out of pocket or use another program that's available. And the other program that's available would still pay parents and spouses to provide care, but it's at about 25% of the pay rate that currently family caregivers who have a family member who qualify for Medicaid get reimbursed for providing care. And the reason that we're talking about this is because in a caregiving situation, benefits end. And there's not enough help, so we often depend on patching together services through, for instance, Medicare home health, or short-term stay in rehab, hospice services, palliative care, and then through our state, like our state's Medicaid program or any other programs that are out there to help. When it's a federal funded program, like through Medicare, you have to have qualifying criteria. So anytime you qualify for services through Medicare, you know that there's going to be a discharge from that program. With Medicaid within a state, it all could hinge on what's the funding availability within the state? And that's what's happening in Indiana. I had a coaching call with a client this morning. She cares for her husband. He started hospice services 6 months ago. So that means that they are in the midst of recertifying. And what that means is her husband is assessed to see if his declines are continuing, so he qualifies to continue to receive hospice services. Now, my client is trying to remain calm about this, but it is stressful for her because the help she receives through hospice is help. It's the most help she's ever had in 10 years of caring for her husband, who had a significant stroke 10 years ago. It's the most help she's ever had. She's able to do things during her week she never could before. She works out, she goes out to lunch with friends. She feels like she's back to life. The idea that hospice services would end is really weighing on her. Now, we talked about it. I think it would be a very unusual circumstance that they would discharge him. Here's the part of it, though, that the providers never explain. The way they talk about it, well, we don't know if he will qualify again, which means that it ends. And in truth, a service like home health or palliative care or hospice can pause. Now, that is my unofficial term. That is not a term a provider will use with you. But in essence, the services pause until there's been another episode, another decline. And I explained that to my client today. And she said, I didn't know that. I was just thinking it's ending for good. If a service through, for instance, Medicare ends, like home health or hospice or palliative care, know that it's just a pause and something's going to happen that will qualify your caree for the benefit again. So, for instance, with my parents, they were on and off home health, palliative care, home health and palliative care over a period of probably about 7 years. And I always knew that it was pausing, and that's how I would explain it to the provider. I know this is a pause, it's not forever. What could change, which could qualify my parents to receive these services again? I always asked that so that I knew when something changed in my parents' condition, I would call and ask for the doctor to order those services to start again. And it's the same with hospice. Now, the challenge for these family caregivers in Indiana, when the funding is gone, the funding is gone. And that's what they're up against. The funding is gone. They don't have money to continue to fund the program, which means they don't have money to continue to pay these family caregivers who are caring for their children, spouses, aging relatives, aging parents. Okay, so let me introduce you to our certified caregiving consultants who are here with me today. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to help you if you find yourself in this situation. I almost said when you find yourself in this situation, but we hope you don't. But it's helpful to know what you can do. Okay, Andrew is here with us. Hi, Andrew. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Denise. Thank you so much, and thanks for the introduction to our topic today.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, and Jenny's here. Hi, Jenny.
Hello. Thank you so much for including me in this conversation. I really appreciate it.
And Kathy's here. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Denise. Thank you for hosting this important discussion.
And finally, Trudy's here. Hi, Trudy.
Hi there. Thanks for including me as well.
Okay, let's get started. So we're going to start with Andrew. When someone says services might end, it is anxiety producing, it is stressful, it is awful. And the other piece of this, especially for the families in Indiana, we're recording this conversation on March 14th. They are still waiting to hear the state's definitive decision. They are in a holding pattern. They are waiting for news, which is also anxiety producing. We need support. Andrew, how can we put together a team of support for us around a situation where we're thinking that help is going to end and we're trying to figure out how do we manage this?
Yeah, thank you, Denise. I think you introduced this concept well. The first stage is we're asking questions, we're asking questions, we're asking questions. And the way I broke down, the way I thought about this conversation today is in 3 points. So I'm going to list the points and then I'll go through them. So the first point is seek first to understand. The second point is you find your flow state. And the third part is make active choices. So again, seek first to understand, find your flow state, and make active choices. And the way I kind of approach this is, it's like you said, Denise, there's anxiety. There's change, there's big changes, there's loss, there's an end. So the way we want to understand this is seek first to understand. If you're familiar with Zig Ziglar, he says, seek first to understand and then be understood. So we want to explore, well, what happens when I experience change? How do I emotionally handle loss? How do I feel a hardship and change and an ending in my body? And then since we're doing this in a relationship with another person, a caregiving scenario, we want to think, well, how is change affecting my loved one? If there's a disease process, how does that potentially impact cognitive or emotional responses? How does it impact their connection with their body? And then we got myself, I'm checking out, hey, here's what's going on in my system, what's going on in their system. And then we look at the third party, right? The relationship between us will change as well. So we seek first to understand what's going on. What's our emotional landscape? And then part two is to find your flow state. And so I think of flow state as this way of engaging with the world around us where we're not necessarily actively thinking, but we're still engaged. This could be through music or dancing or singing or creative writing. Different people have different ways of finding their flow state. And so once you can find your flow state, you can then think about the changes that's coming. Is this a huge change? Is this a small change? Is this a dramatic change? Is this going to happen quickly? So begin to feel, what does the change have? What are the qualities of change? And then match the intensity. So find your flow state, your energy, your flow, and then match the intensity of the change. And then you can start to channel it. You can either bring it on, let it wash over you, let it go. but you're trying to create a relationship with the energy of the change. So you find your flow state. And then the third part is make active choices. So this is what do me, what's under my control. Because so much is out of my control with this change happening, with the benefits ending, with the loss of services, with these huge changes outside of me. What can I control? And once we have an awareness of what's under my control, we can say, well, what can I create? Right? So we've got some boundaries laid out, what I can control. No, I can't do anything over there. So what can I do over here? And then the third part of this is, how can I prepare and plan? So we're recognizing the boundaries of what we can and can't do, and we're preparing within these guidelines and this awareness. And another way to think of this is, how do we brace for impact? How do we roll with the punches, right? So we've taken the time to understand how we are emotionally, how we respond to these changes. We're finding our flow state. We're able to match the energy and the intensity of the changes. And then we're choosing to make active choices rather than being passive. And this might be extra stressful and extra burdensome. It might require extra reading and all the extra stressors. And yet making an active choice will help you feel stronger, feel prouder, feel more affirmed, feel more alive than being passive, particularly when things are ending outside of your control. So that's the way I would approach the handling the emotional navigating of change when benefits are ending.
Yeah, I love that. And a couple of things that you mentioned, I think are really important. And that is, what's the action I can take? And oftentimes it's which leads to what's the question. And it's asking for more information from the case manager, the provider, whoever it might be. And they might not have it, but you ask for it. Ask for it. I need updates. How do I get updates? I need to create a plan for when this benefit ends. Who can help me create a plan? Be specific about the help that you need. That was one of the areas that we went to in the coaching call that I had with my client today, which was, rather than just sitting back and thinking, well, someone will let me know, you can be active to say, I need to know because I need to make plans. This is the most help I've ever had. It's a significant change. Help me manage this change. Who can help me manage this change? Okay, that was great. And Andrew, you're going to give us a good lead into Kathy, who's going to join us in a minute to talk about that grief part. It's a loss. So Jenny, let's talk about how can we tap into our network to help us manage this situation. We're losing help. We need help. And oftentimes it can feel like we can't find it. How can we use our network to help us to connect to resources and possibilities of help?
Well, similar to what Andrew was saying and you, Denise, I think the first thing we do need to acknowledge is this is a change. So trying to stay open-minded around this, because I know personally when major change would happen for me, I would become very, very almost tunnel vision, like it has to look a certain way. And so the first thing I'd have to remind myself is this could look different, but it will still work. And second is actually asking questions. So typically I went through something very similar to what's happening right now in Indiana. And the first thing I would start with was the resource I was losing. And it was asking those questions. Who do I talk to? What would you do if you were in my situation? How soon is this ending? It's the who, what, when, where, and why. And I was realistic that I knew I wasn't probably going to get the answers that I wanted. But I found if I could get to middle management, most often they had been there long enough that they could give me a little spark of a lead that I could write down. And by taking that information, I just kind of started compiling a list of ideas. And I always had this idea of grandeur that I was going to have this great spreadsheet, but it always turned out just to be a worksheet or a work notebook. So be kind to yourself, because remember, this is really challenging. So wherever you can create a list, create the list. And then I would really lean more so into the community and network you currently have. We've all started to create these networks through social media. Doctors, the nurses in doctors' offices are great resources. Let them know, hey, I'm losing this benefit, or we're losing our caregiver, or whatever you seem to be going through at the moment. Let them know what is happening. They hear so much, and they have great resources, and they will share them with you. Hey, can I connect you to a social worker? We may have somebody for you. The best resource I've ever found was our pharmacist. He is in the know. Everybody goes to the pharmacy. That is actually where I found my mother's caregiver, is through the pharmacist. The best caregiver we ever had. We lost our caregiver. Next visit, hey, call this person. So being open and sharing with your community what you have and your needs again. And you don't have to be Debbie Downer about it. You can say, hey, just FYI, if you hear somebody, we're going through this change like everybody else. And you'll be amazed at how your community will rally against you. Or with you, excuse me. Not against you, with you. Let me say that. Sorry, my bad. So sorry. To help you. The other piece that I found, again, that was really challenging for me was trying to stay open-minded, but going back and revisiting old resources. Leaderships are changing several times right now. People are changing jobs, they're moving around. Recently, our senior center was all about senior health. Now we have a new leader in there, and now they're doing senior daycare. They're doing all of these things. So going back and checking old resources can never hurt, even if it's just going on their website. The other thing is, and then there's always Google. And with this particular situation, I just typed in help. I've just lost my state funding for caring for my child. And all of these articles came up. Within those articles, there were definite opportunities where you could tap into different groups that are looking into it. But also halfway down that page, it has, relevant or similar searches. And within those searches, they were talking about grants and all of these different other programs, which I would never have thought to look into. So by clicking on those, that led me to other resources and networks as well. And I would put a timer on that because I can go down a rabbit hole and say, okay, I'm only going to look at this for about 10, 15 minutes. So there are opportunities within those resources that we don't think about. I never would have thought to look into those things without seeing them on Google.
And if you have a spouse who's working outside the home and has an employee assistance program, you can call the employee assistance program and say, we're in a bind, our help is ending, help us find more help, different help. Something else I thought of, Jenny, when you were talking, is that oftentimes we're not sure what help we need. When we're receiving help through a program, we have an experience with help. We understand what it is that we need, and that can help us when we're reaching out to our network. We've had a home health aide 3 days a week, 4 hours a day. It has been fabulous. That's what we're looking for. It actually can help you be specific about the type of help that you want.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you can also think about, let's figure out what the temporary solution is that keeps us going while we still pursue something that can feel more long-term. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about thinking outside the box.
Yeah. And when you said about patching it all together, that was always helpful. Like, okay, we can do this. Just be open to trying it. But I would become so panicked personally. It took me a long time to learn that it doesn't have to look exactly the way I think it needs to, which kind of goes back to what Andrew was speaking about and all of those things. But being open to seeing the network from a different perspective.
And it's always good to reach into your own family system. You never know who's in transition between jobs that could help out for a period of time, who's on break from school that could help out for a period of time, or who just wants to make a little extra money. You just never know. My mom was always suggesting people, and I would think, oh, they're not going to help. And guess what? They always did. I was always wrong. I was always wrong. It's just a good reminder to
Very
just
good
be
reminder.
open-minded. Yes. Okay, Kathy, we're going to move to you because both Andrew and Jenny have really talked about grief and loss. We're in the midst of losing relationships. We depended on these home health aides and nurses and social workers and chaplains, for instance, through hospice to come in and support us. And now they're not going to. And I remember anytime home health benefits were going to end, it was very difficult for my dad because he loved his home health nurse. And he would say, what are we going to do without her? And when palliative care stopped, oh, it was heartbreaking for him. Heartbreaking. And when it ends, it ends. Kathy, how do we manage our grief?
Well, thank you, Denise, and thank you, Andrew and Jenny, for also touching on the topic. Well, first, I just want to talk a little bit about what causes the grief in this situation, which is that that basically there's a lot of, the end of the program causes a lot of grief ripples, both large and small for a family. And as you and I have talked about over the years, anytime there's a change, the body processes it as a loss, and anytime there's a loss, you will have grief. So as you mentioned, the relationship between the two people would change. You know, the person will be the caree will be missing the caregiver if the caregiver is no longer able to stay with them. The caregiver will be missing the caree. And also, it's important to think about anticipatory grief, because I think anytime someone enters into a caregiver situation, they're anticipating the loss or the further decline of the person they're caring for. The loss of this program is just another grief stacking on top of that, that just brings all of that to the surface about how, everything, in their world is really unstable to some extent and just causes more grief. So then there's the loss of stability in care and routines for the caree. If the caregiver decides to continue to care for the caree without being paid, there's financial loss to the family. If the caregiver decides to go to work instead, then there's a loss of identity as a caregiver, and also their concerns about who's caring for their caree. And if the caree needs to go to a facility because no one is home, then that's a further change, complete change of environment, complete change of the relationships. And again, as you said, your father was very concerned about the loss of a program. People get attached to their caregivers, especially if it's a family member. If someone from your family is willing to spend that time with you and suddenly they're gone, that's a huge loss. And then, as you know, it takes a long time to find a relationship with another person, if you can even find that other person, to be able to just get back to stability there. So there's still just so much loss there. I mean, in terms of what people can do, I think people really need to recognize that it's grief. As we said, Andrew and Jenny both talked about anxiety. My personal belief is that anxiety is really like grief fueled, like anticipatory grief fueled. You're anxious because you're worried something's going to happen. So it's important to recognize that. It's important to take time to process that, even though I know that, people losing services are on a treadmill where they're just trying to fill the gaps. But it's important to take a minute and really think that through and think about how you're feeling. Do some deep breathing, do some yoga, maybe do something to sort of calm yourself in the midst of all of it. And also just talking about it. I think what happened in my caregiving situation is that really we never talked to my mother about all the changes that were happening for her, because we were so busy trying to make those changes work. So we kind of assumed she would get with the program, and I think having a real honest conversation about how do you feel about this? How do you feel about the fact that the person you relied on is not here anymore? How do you feel about having to change settings or whatever is really important. So I think all of those things can really help in processing it. And again, it just goes back to recognizing that it's grief, because we tend not to do that.
And it's interesting that anger is a grief response. If you find in yourself in a situation and you think, I don't know if I've ever been so angry in my life about this situation, it's part of the grieving process. And it makes sense you're going to be angry. Something, go ahead, Kathy.
I was going to say, for example, you often get a lot of outbursts from people who are, experiencing this change or anticipating this change, and that's where that comes from.
Yeah, so a caree might be really angry. You're going to be angry. Combustion. And
Right.
and I love this reminder to talk about it. I'm really angry because I think it's unfair that this program is ending. I have been so grateful to be able to stay home and be with you and care for you. I'm angry that someone's taking that away from me. What's making you angry? And then you can have the conversation. You know what? I also was thinking of, Kathy, when you were talking. Anytime my dad had some kind of skin tear that was a significant wound, and basically that was the last 3 years of his life, we kind of celebrated because that allowed home health to continue or to start. And it was so odd to be in a situation where you would think, oh, phew, something terrible has happened. Now we'll get help. Isn't that just like the craziest thing? But that's how it always was. And my dad would say the same thing. Guess what? Because of this terrible wound, she's still going to keep coming. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
It is a crazy way to work things through.
it is. And I think your example earlier of the person who was so happy to have the end of life care, palliative care, I'm not sure which it
Oh,
was.
hospice, yes, because she
Care.
had help. She had help.
That happened to a close friend of mine, actually, the person who took the photograph behind me. His family could not get help, basically, at home. Like they couldn't get reliable help. They couldn't get hooked into services. As soon as he went into hospice care, everything fell into place. And it was a sad time for them, but it was like a relief in some ways, not only because he was going to be at the end of his journey, he had Parkinson's and he would, no longer suffer, but just because there were so many people around to help them. So it's really ridiculous that you have to be in those dire straits to get help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Trudy, we're going to move to you. What we've been talking about today is really managing this project, and it's the project of finding a replacement for the benefit that's ending. What tips do you have for us when we look at this from the perspective of a project manager?
So interestingly enough, all of the things that everyone touched on so far, and pardon me for my voice, but I'm losing it. Um, the emotional impact and the practical impact of all of these changes are very real. But as Denise said, as a project manager, and that from my former experience, I really think that we have to do a reality check at this point. And yes, everything is swirling around. And Andrew said, use all the things that are around you to almost figure out what your environment is at the time. What is your body telling you? What is it was your carees telling? But the reality is figure out where you are. What is the urgency? The first thing I would say is understand what your time situation is about. Like that part of the project management, um, the important parts of it is what is your time? Is it urgent? Can you have the time at this point to look and dig into those resources? We mentioned, and there's been a lot of discussion on tapping into your network, figure out how those people can help you. Do you have the time to do that? I mean, that does take some time, but if in the case of Indiana, the article was talking about, yes, they're on hold at the moment, no, kind of trying to figure out whether that's going to leave them at that certain point without the benefits. But hopefully they're taking this time, these couple of months, to figure out what's next for them individually. And in addition to that, then tap into the network. As Jenny said, we have important resources all around us, and it could be family members, but I found some really interesting resources at my church, and it just happened on basic conversations I had with them. Um, somebody must have said to me one time, boy, are you okay? You look really frazzled today for whatever reason. And I said, well, yeah, and this is what's going on with my dad and with the family. And she said, oh, well, you should talk to so and so. He has a home care agency and he doesn't advertise a lot, but I know that he's local, he's a parishioner. Go and talk to him. And I did do that. And boy, that was a lifesaver to me. So it is just those basic conversations that could s- put you on the right path to begin to dig into that research, and that could help. The other part is, and I believe, Denise, you may have mentioned it, thinking outside the box is totally, it's acceptable. Just as not having to be perfect with every, dis- I have to word this carefully, but with every decision we make, but the one home care company that you choose at first may not be the one that you actually end up going with, because for whatever reason they couldn't meet your schedule, or they couldn't, they didn't have a cohesive relationship with your caree, so it just didn't work. But that's okay, you made that choice. You can then make the choice for the next one, which really helps to know that it almost doesn't have to be perfect. It has to work, and it has to relieve some of that anxiety on, what is on your shoulders every day. But thinking outside the box, again, even with the financial piece, those resources that are being taken off the table, replacing them perhaps with, um, it could be a grant, as mentioned before. It could be other things that help. There's a lot of free resources. I live in New Jersey, and believe me, paid caregivers are non-existent in our state, which is that's a whole different discussion. However, there's a lot of free resources that are in the support realm, free support groups and educational materials, and uh, tele teleconferences that caregivers can participate in. So there are things like that. And I found one that was phenomenal when I needed it, was the United Way of New Jersey. So they offer, they're one of the few that offered a very specific um, support, for lack of anything else, a big word, support for family caregivers at the time. And I know that they've only enhanced that over time. So I say that that's what I mean by digging in and really understanding what you have as resources. And the third thing is definitely create that next plan. I mean, it may be that your plan is to do more research. Okay, you have the time to do that. That's great. But your plan is also, what if the plan is you don't get that funding and you have to figure out how you're going to meet your bills? How financially are things going to come together? It may be a looking into a part-time job. Can I, do something from home when there's downtime for my caree? Is that something that might be workable when I hadn't thought of that before? Um, so create that plan. But one of the other things that someone mentioned was tapping into your family members who, Denise, I think you said, you did have someone that may have been available, or my, it's so funny, you made me think of this, but my brother-in-law at the time had been downsized from his job, and who would have thought he was just perfect for a fill-in for a couple of weeks before I could take over. But he was there to help my dad, and it was just perfect, and it worked. So it fit our needs. Then he got a job, of course, so we moved on to the next options of care. The other thing is always to create that. Once you create the plan, is to talk to your family members, talk to your caree about it. If the plan, moving to the hospice example, if the plan is now to have hospice as your resources, your caree is probably one of the ones you may want to tell about that situation, because often they don't know why there's other people coming into the home. And it's really important that if they can understand that, important to bring them on board. And spouses, especially. My mom was what they call spouse in the house at the time. So when you have all these um, people that were not known before coming in, it is very, very, it changes the dynamics of their home to just when the first person walks in the door, it's going to change the dynamics. Having someone actually live there and be the live-in caregiver is really something to be considered. So I say that those are the just the reality check that might be important to go through.
Couple things I would add. I heard this great tip in a mastermind group that I belong to for small business owners. And they talked about reaching out to 5 people before 10 a.m. And it really was part of your marketing plan. And I thought that could be helpful too when you're trying to figure out what do we do next? And you're thinking about, okay, I have to reach out to people. You have to break it down because it feels so overwhelming. And it could be that you break it down to 5 people I reach out to ask for resources, suggestions that help. And I'm going to do it before 10 a.m. And that way I'll know I've done whatever I can. Something I like to remind myself of all the time is every worry needs a plan. Whatever you're worried about, think about what's the plan to take care of that. Rather than stuck in the inertia of worry where you are not moving forward, move into a planning stage around it because that will help you take action. And really what we've been talking about today is, unfortunately, there's never a forever plan in caregiving. I wish there was. I wish there was. It's always helpful to think about a backup plan. And if you are watching and listening to us and you feel like we're good, everything is good, it's still important to have a backup plan because you never know. It could be that you get the flu, or perhaps you are able to manage in your job and take care of your family member, and the job changes. And now maybe you have to start traveling. What's the backup plan so that you can manage that new career and still feel good about the care that your caree is receiving? The backup plan is always helpful, and it is always changing and adjusting because things are always changing and adjusting. Your caree is having declines, a change in their condition, and you're changing too. It could be that you just feel like right now you didn't have the energy that you had last year. So how do you make up for the fact that you need to rest more, that you just are feeling like toast? You're stuck in that toaster. The backup plan is always good to continue to massage and work through. And I want to mention that we do have free monthly meetings where we help you create a family emergency plan. We help you think through your own recovery plan, and we help you create a rest in place space in your house. So when you can't get out to take a break, you still can go to a special space to get a break. And we'd love for you to join us. And those typically are on Tuesdays and the 4th Friday, and they're always at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, so Deborah's here with us tonight. She's one of our live audience members. Deborah, I'd love to know, what do you think? What would you add?
Wow, these were such great ideas and really covered a spectrum of concerns. I guess where I come into it is probably at the macro level in terms of federal policy making about this, and can we do something about that? It's begun to seem to me that the idea of aging in place, which sounds so good on the surface, may have become a kind of mean trick because it's much easier to cancel smaller things that people may not see right away than to cancel a large federal program. But the Indiana situation, I think, is really beginning to highlight that. Now, I know the president said during his State of the Union that he wanted to see every caregiver get the money that they deserve, and that was wonderful to hear. Whether that will happen, I don't know. But what worries me is not just preserving the situation we have, but I read that there's a $600 billion shortfall in terms of paying caregivers who are working for free, most of us.
Mhm.
You mean,
And
do you, just to clarify, is that on a national level, are you talking about?
that's a national.
Okay.
So $600 billion needs to be found to help people who are struggling to make ends meet while they are caring for someone, and really sustaining losses of financial, mental health, and physical health at the same time. And while all of these ideas that you have are wonderful, what's happening to caregivers, from my point of view, is that we just keep doing more and figuring out more, and that more has just snowballed into, I think, a really unrealistic demand of people. So I think it's wonderful and admirable that we keep finding solutions, and we learn to do teamwork, and we learn to create care circles, and we learn to manage better. That's something I advocate greatly, that we use management skills instead of worry skills to solve the problem. But there comes a point, how much can you manage I'm going to say failing enterprise, because it's not generating enough money to sustain itself. So that's my worries are coming in at a larger part of the picture at this point. But from 3 family caregiving experiences I've had, which each one was different, I'd say that the solutions you offer are wonderful and helpful to the individual in the moment.
Yes, yes, and we have to do that. We have to do that. We
Yeah.
cannot do one without doing the other. It is
Right.
incredibly important that we think about what's the crisis right now? How do we support that family caregiver in that crisis right now? And certainly family caregivers in Indiana have been amazing advocates, really speaking out. They've been showing up at the state capitol. They've been contributing their stories to articles. They are amazing advocates for the program.
Mhm.
And if there's no money, there's no money. That's
Right.
the challenge. And in our country, unfortunately, we are at such a political dysfunctional situation. It's very difficult to think about a solution that's going to come from our legislative bodies. And I think we have to look to ourselves as being the solution.
I agree with you. I think the thing I would underscore is that doing long-term planning from the beginning is really critical. When you take a caregiving assignment, you really need to evaluate what resources you have in place and what would happen if those resources are challenged in some way, because they will be. So I guess that's the only thing I could add to the pot. And I'm sorry for going so wide and large on the problem, but I am very much concerned and researching this lately. But I think you cover it in a way, and the idea of doing reflective thinking instead of reacting is really critical to solving the problem when it comes up. But we really should never be in that situation of not knowing what to do next. We need to educate ourselves better about where those resources are. I've counseled several people in the last few months who didn't know there was a division of aging in their town or county, and done web searching for people just to save them some time. Can't we create a volunteer research network who will do those things for people? But again, that's, the finger in the dike again against a huge flood of gaps, a huge flood of whatever. So I'm not sure. It's so admirable that we are seeking solutions, yet at the same time, we're doing the work that needs to be done by larger policymakers to fix this problem, and piecemeal, instead of using the fantastic resources of a government to make it work better. So.
And I come from the perspective of having been in this space for 34 years. And so I have seen the waste in terms of money, opportunities, collaboration, which is why I don't even go there anymore, because I can't go there. It is devastating to have witnessed, been someone who saw it, someone who experienced it. for so many decades that we all saw the red flags, all the lights turned red, everything was flashing. And in many ways, it's people, I'm just going to be politically incorrect, it's people within our space who did not understand the power of collaboration and instead decided to protect their territory. And what happened is we never moved forward with anything that can help. We never moved forward. And because of that, I think about the power of the collective spirit of people who understand the power of collaboration, who have let go of ego. It's not about protecting my piece of the pie. It's thinking about how do we take care of the entire pie. And in order to do that, just for my own general well-being, I have to look at what's within my control. What can I do? How can I help? What's the impact I can make?
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I think everyone had something very important to contribute. And I especially appreciated Jennifer's idea that it's possible maybe to make a better plan if everything falls apart, because then you're not stuck with dysfunctional pieces that you still have to accommodate. So that may be what we're looking at, is let's blow it up and see what we can do that's different and more innovative and more helpful finally.
And to me, there's a huge opportunity for family caregivers who already run a small business. When they're in a caregiving situation, you are running a small business.
Yes.
To actually start another small business that brings in revenue. And that's really our work, is around training family caregivers through different programs so they can launch a small business and start to earn money. That could be a side gig, a full-time gig, a once in a while gig, whatever it is that works into their schedule. They already have the skills, they already have the know-how, they already have the wisdom, they already have the instincts. Let's tap that and turn that into a solution that changes the experience for everybody, so that we're not dependent upon whether or not the state of Indiana knows how to balance its budget. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line of that situation. We don't want to be dependent on the next Congress,
Yeah.
whether or not the next Congress knows how to pass a budget. We don't want to be dependent on that. We want to be self-sufficient in our experiences. So they are our experiences in the way that works right for us. I think that's so important. I think that's really critical. And that's where I've been really putting my focus. What can we do? What does that look like for us when we create a solution?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a little piece to that. I'm hearing that more and more from my younger caregivers, probably in their 20s and 30s, that they need to look at this as a profession and so they can prepare the next generation for aging as well. Denise, they're on that same page, that they've kind of given up on the government or anybody else coming to save them, that is the mentality that they're coming into. They're coming into it as business women.
Yes.
It's much more, I think I came into it from a heart-centered kind of, I'm going to be a caregiver, and they're coming in much more from a mental, financial, they're thinking of it that way more and more. So,
Yeah.
but the work you've been doing is trickling down.
And interestingly enough, I believe when a family caregiver starts a small business, they have the opportunity to make it both successful from a financial perspective and from that heart place, because you bring both. In order for a business to be successful, you bring both. And that's what you learn to do in a caregiving situation. You learn to feel, you learn to think, you learn to advocate, you learn to be creative. All those skills are what a small business needs to be successful. And you need the passion for the small business in order to be successful. And the passion comes from having experienced it and knowing that it didn't go well because there wasn't enough help and support for you, and you want to make it better for someone else. And so you build that solution.
Yeah, I think as a caregiver, you're being a manager. You shouldn't be doing everything. Your job is to manage all those systems that you speak about, the 17 systems you have to navigate. and not be trying to implement all 17 yourself. So it's very important from the beginning to think about a team of people, and that's where the enterprise comes in. I think that is an excellent approach to it.
Yeah, we're the CEO of our caregiving experience because we are doing everything that a CEO does when we are caring for a family member. Everything. Budget, decisions, motivation. We're motivating people all the time. We are also making people accountable, and especially systems. We are making them accountable. We are holding them accountable. Everything that a CEO does, we do in our personal caregiving situation, which is why the family caregiver is really the next big small business opportunity that's out there. And that generating that kind of revenue is what's going to change the experience.
You know, it's so interesting. I was digging into what's going on in New Jersey, and I just read about the governor proposing his budget. So he just proposed, and for me, it's a very small amount, but $100 million, okay, for this problem. $80 million of that is going to recruit, educate, and train healthcare workers to fill the gaps. And none of that was, even the rest, the remaining was not going to anywhere to pay family caregivers. But I thought, what if we flip that? And that's where we as family caregivers get into that space and recoup all of that. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the record.
It's like Brady.
Yeah. So the money that came through in 2021 that the state of Indiana has used to pay family caregivers through a particular program is the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. So that's what President Biden used during the pandemic to help basically bring everything up. So instead of everybody feeling like, oh, I'm in dire straits, he put money into communities and then communities flourished. What if we put money into family caregivers so family caregivers can flourish? So yesterday I was in Springfield, Illinois for a really great program for small business owners in the state of Illinois. And it was specifically around if you want to do business with universities. And universities, at least in Illinois, have a threshold they have to meet of using small businesses when they contract out for services, products, programs. And typically, other organizations have set something similar. There's a lot of opportunities for small businesses in our country. It's just knowing that the opportunities are out there. If we think about that small business as the family caregiver is a potential small business owner, and then think about what are the grants that allow them to create a small business. And again, it could be a part-time small business. It could be 10 hours a week, but something that makes them feel like I'm contributing to my household. I am taking the financial stress off of my family. It could make a huge difference, a huge difference.
Right, it changes the insurance picture for you if you have a small business, and all sorts of other collateral things that could be quite helpful. So,
okay, we've been almost an hour, so I think we're going to wrap it up. And I want to give our CCCs a chance to let you know how you can be in touch with them. So we're going to go around the horn, as my dad would say. So Andrew, let's start with you. So if our listeners or viewers would like to reach out to you, schedule a complimentary call, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, the best way is to just type in contemplativecaregiver.com, and I should pop right up, and it should be 1 or 2 clicks and you'll be able to schedule it with me. Pretty simple and straightforward.
Andrew has been a CCC since 2016. He's very committed to this work, very committed. So thank you, Andrew, for everything you do. Okay, Jenny, how can our listeners and viewers be in touch with you?
They can reach me at jennyreinier.coach, and the last name is spelled Reinier. And all you have to do is go to services and click on the Let's Chat, and it will take you to a complimentary scheduling process.
Okay, and how about Story of a Caregiver?
A Story of a Caregiver is actually our Facebook page that we share with all different caregivers. And we're also on Instagram as well, where we just share and support other caregivers that are sharing their stories. Thank you, Denise.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Everybody is welcome to join. There's a Facebook page, group, and Instagram, and we have support groups there as well.
Okay, awesome. Kathy, how can our viewers and listeners be in touch with you and perhaps schedule a complimentary session to learn about grief movement?
Yes, well, I'm happy to announce that we've just launched a new website called thetalkaboutgriefproject.com, where you can get in touch with me and also access the monthly events that I do, both solo and with Denise. And there will be a link by tomorrow morning where people can connect about grief movement. How's that?
Okay, there you go. Nothing like pressure. Nothing like pressure. Okay, and Trudy, how can our listeners and viewers be in touch with you?
Sure. My it's under seniormomentsolutions@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to offer a free complimentary session and work on coaching packages with a discount.
And everybody is also on caringourway.com, so you can join our community, caringourway.com. You'll also connect with Deborah there too. So if you want to continue the conversation with Deborah and any of our consultants, as well as myself, join us on caringourway.com. Okay, thanks everybody. So nice to spend this time with you. So appreciate all the wisdom and suggestions you brought. And if you're in this situation where you are thinking and worrying about benefits ending and not sure what next step to go to, reach out to us. We want to help you.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.